We're on our main channel now.
Ooh.
Exciting! Hello, Zero people.
Flip Sophia Nygaard, I wish that she goes, hello, friends. Welcome to another video. I don't know if anybody else follows Sophia. I find her delightful.
I do not.
I was talking with someone about how, like, I think I've mentioned this before, like, the people you follow on YouTube feel so much more personal than, like, my Instagram follows.
Yes, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know why. It's not like I watch anything embarrassing, but there's, like, I just watch some really random YouTubers.
Ooh, we're being introduced right now. Exciting.
Oh, I can't hear it, because if I turn it on, the stream will double. So you have to tell me what's happening here.
Wait, how do we hear it?
You
Twitch,
have the
right?
Twitch page open in the background on your computers.
But I didn't think we were supposed to have... Can we have both running? Because we're supposed to be listening to it through Skype. We can't also listen to it through Twitch.
It's just the intro.
Got it. Okay.
You're being introed right now.
All right. The reason I can't do it is because I'm beaming all my PC sound to all three of you backwards. Right? But you guys can listen in.
There I am.
In musical medievalism in contemporary media, particularly in video games.
Awesome.
And finally, Brian Thompson is professor of practice at Michigan State University. His research explores how video game audio is utilized to communicate gameplay information to players. Brian has previously presented at Music and the Moving Image, North American Conference on Video Game Music, Game SoundCon, Game SoundCon, Game SoundCon.
All right.
Being hosted.
Excellent. Hey, we're on the stream now, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started here. Let me unpause RetroArch. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing pretty good today.
Hello.
It's just a delight to be able to talk about Zelda with people today, honestly. I'm pumped.
Yeah.
So...
Zelda's 35 this year?
That's right.
So old.
Yes. So, we're going to be comparing the Super Nintendo Zelda game, which I hope a number of you have played, because it's an absolute classic. If you haven't played it, you should just quit watching and go play. This is just a fantastic, tremendous game. And we're going to be comparing that to The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds, which is the direct sequel to this video game in a connected way. Most of the Zelda games are not directly connected to one another. There's a lot of indirect references and continuity. But the 3DS title is a very direct sequel to the Super Nintendo games. So we're going to be looking back and forth at both titles here for a little bit. But we'll start with the Super Nintendo one. And I think we'll start with the Sanctuary track here. Talk about some music.
Music.
I think we'll just let it play and then go play.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And there's the loop point.
Yep, let's mute
that's
this
a real
now.
short loop. Real short loop because you are really not spending a lot of time in here. There's very little to do at any point in the game. And I will confess I always hated this track as a kid. It's creepy.
It's creepy.
And I've been reflecting on this ever since. I never wanted to spend a lot of time in there. And so in listening to it, I think there's two kind of culprits, and one of them is just the timbre is kind of in an uncanny valley for me between a vocal and an organ timbre. And then two, it has that intense vibrato in it.
Someone's very scratchy on the stream right now. I don't know who's got all the static going on, but we lost Dana for a hot second there.
Oh, that's weird.
You lost me?
You're good now. You're good now.
Go back to the Uncanny Valley.
Okay. It's in an uncanny valley for me, where it's sort of between like a vocal timbre and like a Hammond organ, and part of that is just the extreme amount of vibrato on the track. Every note is very wiggly, and so it's got sort of a creepy feel to it. And it wasn't until the GS game that it sort of set it in a better choral context. So if we want to listen to that one really quick.
Yeah, I'm walking there now, and let me get the sound working for it as well. Here we go. Because we're in church, literally, the choral voices make some sense here. I really like how you hear the ending counterpoint line right there as a vocal resolution, that you don't hear it that way on the Super Nintendo game.
Yeah.
It's such a boomy acoustic, like it gets so muddy.
Yeah, you're actually in a nicer church in the 3DS version of the game, a larger space, which is ludicrously true as well, because this side room exists, though of course the acoustics wouldn't matter if there was like an organ closet back here. So, Dana, do you want to look at the transcription you've done of this quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I did a few transcriptions of the Super Nintendo version specifically, and there's a couple of reasons that I didn't do both. One of them is just that the DS is such a direct remake, but it also has to do with just sort of my access to the technology. So I have the ability to separate channels on the Super Nintendo sound and just go channel by channel and get as accurate of a transcription as I can, in a way that I didn't have a good way into the sound files for the DS. This is a format that I haven't really worked in, so we're just going to go with timbral descriptions of the DS. Anyway, all of that is to say, any of these transcriptions are going to be the link to the past versions, but most of the musical content is pretty much the same. It's mostly just instrumentation changes and things like that. So this is my transcription, which I will talk over a little bit because we have heard it now. So the big thing that we're going to notice is sort of how this is constructed. So the biggest thing is that the bottom voice is actually offset to create the echo effect, and that's part of that uncanny valley. So it's outlining the overall contour of the chord that is happening, the main melody, as it's descending. But if you look at the top voices, you'll notice that it is actually sort of staggering between them and then sustaining as the other one happens. So right in that track, we get one of Koji Kondo's most used techniques for this entire game, in that he spreads out melodies across channels in that way, where like each successive note is in a different channel in a descending order. And he does that so that he can sustain and get this echo effect and have a richer, like deeper soundscape while the other ones are entering, but it still comes across to our ear as this fully formed melody. And in this case, he actually does do the offset at the bottom. That sort of is like the composite version. So for some of this one actually had the like composite of everything sort of in it, but the some of these other tracks I've actually made that same type of composite just so we have something better to look at, because it can be a little bit weird to sort of parse it in real time when you're just looking at my transcriptions.
So I'm ready to trigger the Kakariko track now. I have to get to a spot where I can turn on the Super Nintendo music here. We'll walk into town and we'll hear it now.
I thought to say one more thing about the...
Yeah, go ahead, Julian.
Go for it.
I was like I'm totally new to Link Between Worlds. According to this moment, basically, this is my first encounter, and that Sanctuary version, it freaked me out a lot more than the Link to the Past version.
Really?
And I think it's because it had more voices that sounded like voices, but there weren't any voices. There weren't people in there singing, or something.
Oh yeah, because you want to see the reference for the sound.
Choir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're all inside paintings. All right.
Anyway.
We'll get there in a moment.
Now we're safe. We're home, right? It's a town theme, so.
It might even be the town theme, the archetypical model for the way town music functions, right? Not a lot of different chords.
I totally agree.
You're on chord 1, and you're not really going very far, harmonically speaking. There's no adventure, no excitement.
Melody is very stepwise.
Yep. 3, 2, 1. Right, we're just walking down.
We're in major because we're happy, we're safe,
Right.
we're home.
No danger anywhere near here. Not a bit.
That's right. Though there is a cool effect here, which
We get
counts
like
as a
music
cool
effect
effect on the Super Nintendo, where the music gets quieter when you're indoors.
Yeah, I love that.
To me, this theme always, it's you're right, it's the archetypical town theme, but there's something very lullaby-ish about it, where it just, it's very soothing. It makes you want to go to sleep.
Yes, you could totally, in fact, I have put a child to sleep to this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yes,
Do you
absolutely.
make the words, or do you just sing like laws?
Oh no, I just set it on a CD on repeat and then left the room.
Oh, so good.
So let's switch.
This is mostly a safe space, although we should note that if you go talk to that girl, you trigger an unsafe moment where the soldier comes after you. Because you're being framed for kidnapping the princess. That's
right. And in fact, I still am being framed actively because I mentioned just before we all went live, though you see me with the level 3 sword 2/3 of the way through the game, I cheated. I've not pulled the Master Sword yet. There's a weird glitch you can use to skip a lot of the Light World, which I did because I didn't have time to play the whole thing in full, so I skipped the Hyrule Castle dungeon. Which means I will still have to do this fight.
Do you remember the other unsafe thing in the village in Kakariko?
It's another lady wandering around, right?
Yeah.
Okay, besides
any of the NPCs, right?
Yeah, but what else?
Chicken attack, right?
Yes! Possibly one of the most
Could we just trigger that just because?
Yeah, hold on.
So, yeah, this game is animal activism here. If you try to beat up on the poor chickens, they will exact their revenge on you. It's hard to watch them, because it takes quite a stroke. You're just really...
Yeah, it takes a long time.
I've trapped this one, so hold on.
There we go.
There. And now...
The frame rate below.
Yeah, the frame rate drops like mad.
So there is a tribute to this moment in the 3DS game, so I'm glad you brought it up, Julianne. Is that one of the mini games is Cuckoo dodging. They just trigger this artificially within a confined space, and you just have to not get hit for 30 seconds. Alright, the frame rate is tanking though, so we're gonna go in here and turn off our sound here and switch over again.
I giggled when I saw that game, the mini game in the DS. I thought that was so clever.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna hear their version.
Okay. Oh, right. Only the analog stick will move. Okay, let me...
Creep it up.
And I want to point out, the 3DS normally has 2 screens, top and bottom. You're seeing them left and right, just because that's the way the emulator makes it work a little easier. And the touch screen at the bottom, I have on mouse click, actually, so that's how I'm doing that. Well, let's go to the village here.
Yeah.
And here's our town music.
It's a weird thing to think about how to capture. Oh, so first of all, we get this gorgeous acoustic guitar.
That's what I wanted to ask first of everybody, is when you hear it on the Super Nintendo, do you understand that as this instrumentation? This is one of the rare tracks where I have a hard time hearing it not voiced this way.
I heard it as harp and flute, and I can't tell you why right now.
Yeah.
But this is better. Like, this is what it should be.
I think because we're so used to hearing harp or harp-like equivalent as opposed to guitar in themes like this, because it fits more with like the idea of the vocalist.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
like would feel loose, but it's hard to specify versus guitar. But harp comes more immediately to mind, I think.
For sure.
Yeah, and if you played like other like Nobu or lots of games, lots of harp used in sound themes.
Yes.
So I was at the time playing a lot of Final Fantasy IV.
And
so
from the chat, is it High Junior? Temple, the Hyrule Castletown theme is acoustic guitar on the 64. Mm-hmm. So yes, you're prepped kind of across the generations of Zelda titles. Get away from me, Soldier Dude. To hear it that way. Absolutely.
But in general, I would say that this one wasn't as big of a surprise. Like the Sanctuary one made me reevaluate like how much I had treated as like an almost organ. And then I heard the DS version and went, oh, that's a choir. And then
yes.
It made a lot of things make sense. This one, I'm like, oh yeah, this is exactly how you would translate this track.
One of the things I really like about this one is you notice that we've not yet looped, because the second loop of the tune, we hear it on a different orchestration every time to artificially extend the length of the track. And the music box playthrough we just heard is really tremendous, where it's like either a music box or a glockenspiel. On the extreme high range.
Yeah, and it's really nice to think about, we mentioned how short that Sanctuary loop was. This is also a relatively short loop. It's a little longer than some, but you spend a good amount of time wandering around the village finding the little secrets, and you come back here often enough that having an extended version makes sense.
Yes, so. Especially in the 3DS version of the game, though you'll notice I farmed the village for the little Maya critters before we got started so I could demonstrate something in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
There's like 8 or 10 of them here, as opposed to 5 or so in the other areas.
Right.
I don't know what that means.
Oh, we'll show you. We'll show you. It's fun.
Yeah, in fact,
can we look at my transcription then?
Yes, let's do that, and then I'll go over to the Maya thing. We'll cover one new thing on the 3DS very quickly.
Yeah, sounds good.
Let me cut the 3DS sound. I will say, because I'm running a lot of things at once to broadcast relatively smoothly, if there's any frame losses or the music speeds up and especially slows down weirdly, you should assume that's the emulator and not the actual game, if that makes sense.
Right.
But yes, let me put the... there you go. Dana, your video's live on stream now.
Cool. So here's my transcription of Kakariko. Yeah, see, I hear it as cello. It's not not immediate that.
Oh yeah, no, it's
we
just
were
strings.
all misremembering.
You're right. Yeah, it totally sounds like strings.
That's not harp. What's wrong with me? That's amazing.
You'll see I have a melody line in SSC1, and then I did a composite channel right below that, just to make it clear what the accompaniment is, because the accompaniment is spread out in part. And then 5 is doubling the melody on alternating between a flute and a bell sound, and then 6 is strings with delay. I love this beat section. It's so warm. So we have a really unified, almost all of the channels are the string sample, which I called cello, but since these would have been input the way they are with MIDI and everything, it's just one string sample. So if it's higher, it sounds like violin. If it's lower, it goes into like viola cello range. And I there were a few places where I could have put stuff in like viola, but I figured it's a little easier to read bass clef for some folks, unless you've had more practice. So
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so like a lot of cello, maybe some violins and the melody, and then the flute bell alternation. There's no percussion or anything else. It's very, very placid, which sort of fits. And then when then you hear the acoustic guitar, it is a switch, but it's not that surprising. Like I really felt, this just feels good as a translation of that theme.
For sure. Let's go to the main Hyrule field theme, and then we'll do Mother Maya Mai, because I'm right there on the 3DS.
And I didn't transcribe the Hyrule theme, so sorry.
That's okay. It's worth listening to
it's iconic,
for a quick second, just to get the perspective.
I did one for my dissertation. I just forgot to share. I didn't make a very cool video like Dana did, let's be real. So.
All right, here, let's go out. The drums here really run into limitations of what the technology can handle.
I enjoy it though. I mean, to be fair, the brass samples aren't that amazing either. They're kind of derpy in points. The low ones in particular.
And what I always like to point out about early release Super Nintendo games, because Final Fantasy IV does the same thing, is that you lose some of the cool counterpoint melodies that the NES had in trade for the slightly better technology and the slightly better samples, right? These at least sound like a brass instrument or like a string instrument at times, whereas the NES, you're just hearing square waves. You can't ascribe an instrument to those. But there's no dun da 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 dum ba da 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 dum, right? The NES version of this track has a cool echo effect going on the whole time, and this one does not. But, and if you listen to Final Fantasy IV's prologue, the bridge crossing theme, FF1 and FF3 have the cool counterpoint line on the NES, and this one does not again. Let's switch back to the 3DS quickly.
Can I just say one thing about the what you were saying about ascribing musical instruments to the old like NES version?
Yes, please do.
I think it's a really interesting kind of question to play is like what about those earlier sounds affords a certain sense of, I think a brass instrument would play that, or I think a high woodwind might play something like that. So it's like a kind of like a good way of like teasing out musical parameters, especially in a Music 101 class.
And so often it has to do with gesture, right? Like what were we playing recently, Ryan, where you were like, I hear this as clearly brass, even though was it the Game Boy Oracle of Seasons?
I think so, yeah. And
there was a moment where you were like, and Dana's not gonna like this because I'm an 8-bit person, and so I don't tend to like ascribing,
That's
an
right.
instrument. I'm like, just call it whatever wave it is. But you were like, I hear this as brass, and I'm like, well, that's because like so many other markers of fanfare were present in the track that there was like the musical gesture solidified that as, well, of course that's going to be brass. So like that one didn't bother me.
Right. To answer the question in the chat, by the way, we have covered all of Final Fantasy VII to Comic Effect with the new one all of last summer, like 11 streams worth to get through the whole thing. And if anybody tuned into VGM Together, we gave a more formal presentation comparing FF7 Remake to FF7 PlayStation as well. I like the B section, the loop here. Again, we're talking about extending the loop, right? We get just a little bit more flourish in the winds than is normally there on the Super Nintendo edition of the game to cycle us back around to this moment.
Can we like listen to this? Because the whole loop. Oh. Oh, dang.
Right, there's a cool, like, deceptive cadence that sets up this section, right?
There's so much going on. Oh, man.
Yeah, a really interesting reorchestration of this. I don't know why it didn't occur to me to do the overworld theme. That's such an obvious thing that I did.
This is what I'm talking about right here. Da-da-da-da-da-da-dum, right?
Yeah, there we go.
And here's our loop point right here. Oh, sorry, it lagged right there. Okay, we have to listen to this theme, though, just because it's so fun, and there's nothing like it on the Super Nintendo. Talking about what the 3DS adds here. This is the upgrade area for the 3DS game. You get a bunch of items you can see on the right screen now. I've got all the toys, but they're not all upgraded yet. And I've purposely held a couple of them back because you have to find this big critter's children scattered throughout all of Hyrule and all of the Dark World. And when you trigger an upgrade, what's fun is they all sing for you.
Yeah, this is a fun little quest in this game. She's missing her, 100 babies?
Yes.
They're just scattered over the world and you have to find them, and sometimes the ways to find them are kind of entertaining.
I just think it's incredibly goofy that they have human voices.
Yeah.
What is the lore of this creature?
We don't know.
Okay.
But they're cute.
They're very cute.
They are adorable, yes.
And the only annoying thing is that once you are assigned that quest and you start seeing them places, they have a little like squeak that they do that kind of indicates, oh hey, one of these is around, and so it kind of clues you in to look for it. But if you're not doing that at the moment, you know, not in the mood to lodge one free, then it can be kind of an annoying sound.
For sure. Dana, do you have the Dark World transcribed?
The overworld, no. I didn't do either overworld theme. What's wrong with me? But I do have the dungeon themes and the fairy fountain and just like the generic cave.
Okay, let's head over to this dungeon. We'll actually cover it on the Super Nintendo first, but to save time, since I'm on this one, I'm going to ride the broom over there very quickly. So we'll mute and pause this emulator, shift scenes over.
Yeah, it's funny when I was asking folks like, oh, what are the transcriptions we want to do? And like, nobody was like, oh, hey, the overworld themes, and so then I just didn't think of it.
Yeah, no, that's equal
Those
fault
are like
there.
the ones that I have, so I didn't even think about like being like, hey.
So funny. I mean, I haven't done
so
like.
Prepared.
Yeah, I haven't done one of my. I've definitely transcribed the overworld themes from like various Zeldas before.
Hold on, we've heard the overworld theme now, so I'm just gonna fast forward over to the dungeon. I think I can get there.
Don't you love emulators?
It's really cool.
Are
I'm glad that Ryan can do all this awesome stuff.
Do you like that I can also play at like 3 times speed and not fail? That's some practice. More practice than I want to admit that I've had.
You are skilled.
It's this way,
Yes,
and
sir, you are
over,
very, very skilled.
and we charge it here. We let go of it there. And now we're here. Okay.
I would play through my backlog of games so much more quickly if I could play them all at like twice the speed.
I love the build-up of the chords here. Bum, bum, bum.
And that low, boomy, and it's so echoey and cavernous.
That's the one thing I really, really, really love. Well, I mean, it's not the one thing. It's one of the things that I love about this game. Is just the sense of acoustic space that it renders.
For sure. I like that it speeds up ever so slightly right there as well. Dun 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 dun.
It's every note too. When you pull apart the channel data, it's pretty impressive how quickly it ramps up.
Yeah. And now we have a more normal dungeon theme than the start, right? This is actually slightly less creepy just because it's more stably moving forward.
And we have that
Less
interesting
silence.
trumpet melody.
It's definitely brassy.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm calling it a trumpet just based on range, but...
Yeah, it's like it's trumpet range, but it's not trumpet blood.
Right.
It's like more.
And if memory serves,
Yeah.
it will not loop around to the intro again. It stays on this
No, it
part of the
doesn't.
piece until the end, until you finish the dungeon at this point.
Well heard, because you'll see that in the transcription.
So
There's a couple interesting loop points that come up, as we go further on, where it didn't go back to where I thought it would. Do we want to see the transcription real quick?
you know what? Let's see the transcription before I do the 3DS version of this piece, because we have something more to say. Would you, before you hit play on this one, would you lower the volume to about 3/4 of what you had it at last time? It'll help you talk over it a little better.
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a little hard to hear Dana and Julianne. But Ryan, your voice is coming through pretty clear.
We'll try that. So this one is going to be a more extreme example of the layering technique that we saw in the other tracks because of that cavernousness of it. So this is where the composite line really helps us, because you can just see it goes down 5 and sometimes 6 voices. And it just holds in that chord cluster. And pretty much as soon as it enters, it kind of stings and then immediately drops in dynamic. And that's a good, 25 beat per minute jump there in 8 notes. So this is actually a pretty simple theme. We've got our staccato bass line, and then we just have the same pattern just moving around. Da-da-da, 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 da-da-da. And so the brass line over that is really what gives any kind of theme, because otherwise it's just sort of the same modular little motive getting stuff in place. So yes, it loops right back to where we're already in the... I'm just going to jump in the video a little bit. Right. It doesn't skips all of that intro stuff. It just goes to where we're already in the main area. So that one's not surprising. We have a slow intro, and then it goes into the main track that then plays for the rest of it.
So, listen to what it does on the 3DS in the same dungeon. It builds up the ambience entirely differently.
Mm-hmm. It's a little bit brighter. Like the other one, I really get the sense that we were like deep underground, right? It's so cavernous, it's so low.
We still had a moment just now where it unfolds.
I'm not getting the same sense of depth.
Right.
Like
Very
low.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, and though the gameplay, like this sequence, is the same as on the Super Nintendo, it's actually a little bit harder mechanically here. They really want to capture the feeling of the Super Nintendo game, but this track just unfolds entirely differently.
A little more contemplative.
Right.
That's a good word, yeah.
Right here you can hear the melody coming in, right? Ba-da-da.
We have what is the bell or celesta or whatever, kind of like music boxing over the top.
Yeah.
I don't even know what instrument that's supposed to be, but it's like those high synths. And it lends a totally different sense of like ambient space.
So there's a reason for that.
Feel like I'm underground.
Let's pop out of the dungeon. Haha, I didn't mean to make that a pun with the painting mechanic, but there it is. First of all, I didn't showcase this a moment ago. Listen to how this changes when you hit the wall.
Oh, dang. Huh.
It's similar to how we noticed in Kakariko, the sound changed when you went into the house. Like it's like there's a filter path on it, right?
Yeah, it's a low pass filter. That's very cool.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense that you're inside of the space. What I wanted to bring up very quickly is, and let me see, I've got a window covering up the relevant spot, so I need this one, thank you. In the light world on the Super Nintendo, all 3 dungeons have the same music. That's one of the few weaknesses of the Super Nintendo game, is that the dungeon music is reused. Not so on the 3DS title.
Oh.
I wanted to get away from the spinning blades.
And this actually harkens back to our Final Fantasy VII Remake stream. One of the things that we applauded that game for was the sense of extending some of the original material, and in that case we were talking about there were different versions of the battle theme, so you get less listener fatigue as you're spending a lot of time in a JRPG doing grinding and building up levels and battling. In this one,
and because we're short for time, let's cut to something that makes that more obvious, actually.
Spend a good amount of time in the dungeon, and if the loop isn't that long, that can get a little bit repetitive. And so, you know, as we go to these different technologies, being able to come up with a new theme or somehow rearrange it or extend it can really be to the credit when we're doing a sequel or a remake.
So here is what used to be a light world dungeon, and
listen to those.
Ooh.
This does 2 things for us.
In there because we're in the desert dungeon.
There's definitely a little bit of like exoticist timbres, which is really common for deserts. And but what
I love the girl.
What stands out to me more than anything is all of the new tracks for the dungeons have a real sense of space to them that Karen was talking about the Super Nintendo game giving earlier. They really play with that on the 3DS to make these spaces expansive.
Yeah. Cool. So shall we, just to finish up here, look at a Dark World dungeon? Or the Fairy Fountain, or both?
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, let's go to a Fairy Fountain.
Yeah.
5 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Alright.
And in fact, actually, we could just go to it here and then watch my transcription. We don't have to go to one in
we'll do
the
that.
Super Nintendo.
Here you go.
Oh, that's fun.
Very consistent across all of the Zeldas. It's almost always harp.
Actual harp.
As we're about to shift to a Super Nintendo video of this track, I do want to point out quickly, there is one track that starts on the Super Nintendo. Zelda's Lullaby starts here, and the chord progression is different on the Super Nintendo than it is in every other subsequent game. I don't think I have a 3DS version of it queued up because it doesn't occur in this game until the very, very end.
Mm-hmm.
But they make it slightly more complicated on the Nintendo 64 and forward. This track, though, I think is the same progression.
I think
all
it's,
the time.
Yeah, pretty consistent across all the games.
Yeah, I'm gonna mute this, Dana,
that.
and put your video live.
Yep. So I will, apologies on this one. I did not exactly transcribe. What I'm hearing is the intro, arpeggiated, gliss. I didn't have time.
That's close.
But I did do a composite, which I think is a lot easier to follow, because yet again, we have the same layering technique, and it's really ramped up in this one, because we're doing it across two, like a bass line and a treble line.
If you want to talk about how these songs get transformed into orchestral pieces, this transcription Dana's done, can you pause it right there, Dana, with one of those screens visible in the video? Do a really good job of that, because the technological means by which they make that delay happen on the Super Nintendo isn't how you would play it if you had a harp, right? You would just read the composite line. If Dana will go back about 6 seconds in the video, we'll see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so you would play these top two. Oh, you are seeing my cursor. Cool. Yeah, so you would just be playing, the top two, and then it would look like this. And notice I even added that tie-in, which may not exactly be how long it's held in the track, but yeah, you can see it's very hard to read it as the actual channel data. So I like to do composites when there's this type of layering, but you can see just how it's everywhere in this game. And I think that speaks to Karen's point about the amount of space that we're implying, because we are allowing room for echo and reverb through the use of splitting everything across channels. And he is very organized. I noticed that first entrance is SPC1, second is 2, and it always descends in a logical way, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. I think we're about out of time. Usually we go for 2 hours on Thursdays. So if you like this type of material, you're welcome to watch us at twitch.tv/BardicKnowledge most Thursdays. But for now, what questions can we answer for folks? Let us, mod team, do we pop over to the Discord? Do we stay on video on this stream and get hosted here? How do you want us to do voice and video for Q&A?
There also was a good one in the chat that I wanted to come back to while we wait for the answer there. That was asking about the musical relationship between games in the franchise that aren't directly tied, like these two are, and particularly asking about Breath of the Wild. And I was like, I know we can definitely speak to Breath of the Wild because it's one that a lot of us have played, even though we haven't streamed it. And I will just say that's one of the things that I loved the most about Breath of the Wild is that it is so sparse and it allows the soundscape room to breathe, and it sort of allows you to take in how massive the open world really is.
Hey, switch your video cams and Discord channels over while you're talking, and then we'll get going with the Q&A
over to yours.
Over to On Air VC on Communities of Play, and turn your Discord video on and your Skype video off, so that your camera will pick up on Discord. That way they'll put our faces all together here. And I'm going to stop the stream broadcast proper, and we'll switch over.
Mm-hmm.